If I had $10,000 to invest today, I'd split it into three pieces: 7K, 2K, and 1K. The 7,000 would handle most of the portfolio. The 2,000 would give me exposure somewhere completely different. And the last 1K is where I'd be willing to take a little more risk. So starting with the biggest piece, the first 7K is going into VU. VU is Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF, so with one fund, I'm getting around 500 of the biggest companies in the US. As of June 2026, it actually held 506 stocks, and the expense ratio was only 0.03%. So on 10,000 invested, we're talking about roughly $3 a year in fund expenses. Now look at what VU has actually done. Over the 10 years ending June 2026, the fund averaged 15.47% per year, including dividends being reinvested. That's an incredible 10-year run. 10,000 compounding at that exact rate for 10 years would have grown to a little over 42,000. I obviously wouldn't expect 15% every year going forward. The S&P 500 has had a very strong decade, but that track record is a big reason I'm comfortable putting 70% of the money here. There's something I'd keep in mind with VU though. Even though I'm buying more than 500 stocks, the money isn't spread evenly between them. Right now, Nvidia alone is about 7.5% of the fund. Apple is around 6.5%. Then you have Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Broadcom, Meta, Tesla, some other huge companies near the top. If you add up the 10 biggest holdings, they make up almost 38% of VU right now. So this is a broad fund, but a pretty big chunk of my 7K is still going into the largest companies in America. I'm fine with that. I just don't want the other 3,000 doing the exact same thing. So the next 2K goes into VXUS. That's Vanguard's Total International Stock ETF. And this fund is huge. It currently holds more than 8,700 stocks outside the United States. Now my portfolio starts looking pretty different. Japan is the largest country in the fund, then Taiwan, the United Kingdom, Canada, Korea, China, Switzerland, France, Germany, and India. And some of the biggest individual companies are Taiwan Semiconductor, Samsung, ASML, and Tencent. One number I really like here is the concentration. Remember, the 10 biggest companies in VU make up almost 38% of the fund. In VXUS, the 10 biggest holdings are only about 15%. So this 2K is actually spreading my money into something different instead of giving me another ETF full of the same US companies. Performance has been lower. Over the last 10 years, VXUS averaged just under 10% per year. VU was over 15 during that same period, and I'm okay with that. 70% of my money is still in VU, so if US stocks keep having the better run, that's still most of my portfolio. I just want some money invested outside the US too. For me, 20% is enough. So now I've invested 9,000, 7K in VU, 2K international, and I have 1,000 left. That last 1K is going into QQQM. This one tracks the NASDAQ 100, so it's much more concentrated in large growth companies. Over the 5 years ending June 2026, QQQM averaged 16.52% per year. VU averaged 13.36% over that same 5-year period. Over the last 3 years, QQQM averaged 26.66%, while VU was at 20.58%. Those are some serious returns, and of course there's no guarantee that keeps happening. But with 1,000 out of the 10,000, I'm comfortable giving this part of the portfolio a little more room to run. There is also a lot of overlap here. If I own VU, I already own Nvidia. I already own Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, and Meta. Buying QQQM means I'm putting even more weight into a lot of those same companies, and that's exactly what I'm doing. The first 2K outside VU was about spreading the money around. This 1K isn't. I'm intentionally leaning a little heavier into growth with 10% of the portfolio. I wouldn't personally want that to be 70% of my first 10,000, but 10%? I'm comfortable with it. It's had incredible returns, but it can also swing a lot harder than the S&P 500. Now the whole portfolio is done. 7,000 in VU, 2,000 in VXUS, 1,000 in QQQM, 70% sitting in large US companies, 20% spread across international markets, 10% getting the heavier growth tilt. 3 funds, and I can tell you exactly why I own all 3. I also wouldn't be constantly messing with these percentages. If VU has a great year and suddenly it's 72% of the portfolio instead of 70, I really don't care. When I add more money, I can put a little more into whichever part is falling behind. Because after I get this first 10K invested, that's what I'd really be focused on, getting to the next 10,000. Here's why that matters so much early on. If I can add 500 a month, that's another 6,000 going into the account over the next year. A 10% gain on my original 10K is 1,000. Just continuing to add 500 a month adds 6 times that amount myself. Those calculations changes as the account grows. When you have hundreds of thousands invested, a good year in the market can move your account more than you could ever add yourself. But with my first 10K, I'm still the one doing most of the work. So that's how I'd invest it. 7,000 in VU, 2,000 in VXUS, 1,000 in QQQM. I wish you all the best in your journey, and if you found this helpful, subscribe to Dollar with a Plan. I have new videos every week.